All right, we are rolling. Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Astra Kansas Money Talk podcast. I'm Joe Blubaugh. I'm one of your hosts, and we are joined this morning, as always, by Bob Schwartz and Mark Johnson of Bob Schwartz Financial.
Hello.
You can learn more about them at bobschwartzfinancial.com. They have offices in Silver Lake, Kansas, as well as Victoria, Kansas. And if you're watching us on YouTube, we would ask that you hit the bell, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe. And if you're listening to us or watching us on a podcast, if you could and you feel inclined, give us a rating and help others find our program, and we appreciate that. Today, we're going to spend a little time talking about investments and investing through the workplace, and we're going to talk specifically about 401ks. A lot of what we'll talk about today also applies to 403bs and 457bs, but Mark, maybe you can give us a few moments and tell us about what is a 401k for those that maybe aren't familiar with it.
Yeah, if you're not familiar with what a 401k is, which I know a lot of people are, with it's become the most popular probably form of retirement plan offered by companies, but it's a tax advantage retirement savings plan offered by employers in the United States. So it lets employees contribute to a portion of their salary pre-tax to either a traditional 401k or a post-tax Roth 401k. Those are kind of the most popular things that we're seeing now. Okay,
and it is important to note that there is a Roth option available through most. That doesn't have to be. Is that correct?
Yeah. They don't have to offer you a Roth option, but we're seeing that being a very popular thing that people that employers are offering for their employees.
Okay. And Bob, when it comes to 401ks, do most employers offer matches? Is this something that is kind of up to the employer?
In a 401k, you're required to offer some type of match.
Okay.
Generally, around 3%. So if you put away 3% of your income, the company will match that and go in at that time. I think it's very important to understand the birth of the 401k and what was unleashed on the American public in the late 1980s. When I got out of college in 1973, roughly 70% of Americans that worked in the public workforce had a pension plan. Today, that's around 15%. So what this allowed companies to do, pension plans cause long-term debt for companies. So like I'll use the United Auto Workers. I remember used to hear back in the early 2000s that every GM car you bought, there was $5,000 worth of cost was the pension. Okay, so by getting rid of pensions, corporations got rid of that future cost, and they put the onus of that where? On the working guy. And so I remember early on, people would come into the office and they go, "I'm not getting into that because my company's sponsoring it, and I don't trust them. These are union guys, right? Specifically talking about maybe Goodyear." In Topeka, guys come in, "I'm not putting money in." I go, "Listen, you got to put money in." They still have their pension, they still had it, but it has been decreased, since that time. So that's what started 401ks, and it has created more wealth for people retiring today, than our parents ever dreamed of, for those that anchored into that 401k and understood it. So spin forward to today, and that's kind of what we all wanted to talk about today, is what's happened with the 401k marketplace and what some advertising that you see that talks bad about them. And we're going to kind of try to bust some of that a little bit.
Well, before we get into some myths and some disadvantages, if there really are any, what are some of the advantages of a 401k, and why should people seriously consider getting involved with those at their workplace?
Yeah. There's kind of like big five, but first one, tax advantage. You get to contribute lower taxable income, or if it's in a traditional, or you get to grow tax-free in a Roth. I mean, those are amazing things right off the bat. Second, employer matching. Your employer is given, if you have the opportunity to contribute up to a match or more, But if you contribute up to that match, they are giving that money to you. That is an incredible tool for your retirement. And something, if you have an employer that's given that large match, I mean, you should take advantage.
You better match. Yeah.
Yeah.
You better be doing that because when you reach Social Security age or retirement age, that's going to be your money. That nest egg is going to be what you're going to live on.
Yeah. And automation, that's the other kind of one of the other biggest things. Whenever you never see that money, it's coming out of your paycheck. It's easy to save. It makes it very easy to do this. Hey, you put one thing on a form at the beginning of the year. Hey, I want to withhold this much. Maybe it's up to that match that we talked about, and it's automated. It's gone, and you never see it. But you look at that statement, and it's growing. And every 5 years, you look at that, and you're like, "Wow, this is moving for me." And it's only compounding.
Jump in there, Mark. In my career, of course, I have been self-employed since I was 26 years old, and it's so much better to have a 401k where it's coming out of my paycheck than it is to at the end of the year go, well, Bob, here's how much you made last year. This is how much you can put into your SEP or your whatever plan you have, and sit there and go, how am I going to come up? I mean, it's much easier to save out of payroll, and to save small amounts every pay period.
Yep.
And that also allows you to take advantage of dollar cost averaging.
Amen. Yep, you're buying 2 times a month or once a month as opposed to once a year.
Yep.
Yeah. And next one would be, you have a lot of options in your 401k. Your money's not just going there and sitting. It's going to be invested into something. And there's a lot of different options for that you should be able to decide. And your company is going to have options for you. And you need to, one of the most important things is understand what your objectives are. And then you need to look at your options and take advantage of the options they give you. There should be some low-cost options that have the ability to grow for the long term for you that you should take advantage of. And I guess that the last thing that creates compound growth. So 401s create positive compound growth for your investment returns.
And one of the things about compound growth is, and we've mentioned this on the show before, that time is your biggest ally when it comes to compound growth. And that's why it's so important to get started as early as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're starting a new job and they're offering a 401k and they're matching 5%, try to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Try to get there.
Right. There's auto enrollment today that some companies require that. I think it's great. You are automatically enrolled in the 401k when you go to work, but that doesn't mean just you're in it and forget about it, because that goes into a fixed account. Okay. And if you're 23 years old and you're starting a great new job and your money's going into a fixed account, you are just long-term probably hurting yourself tremendously, and you need to be engaged with the process.
And when you say a fixed account, that you're talking a more conservative investment there.
I'm talking a fixed 3%.
Right.
Just like a savings account. Yeah.
Gotcha. And what you're suggesting is that they at least look at what mutual funds or what funds might be available.
And have a risk assessment, understand what their risk tolerance is. But it's been proven for years and years and years, the longer your money can be placed in an equity position over a long period of time, the returns to the consumer are fantastic. And, just talking to a client this week, my account's up $300,000 this year. Well, why is that? It's not because they put that much money in. It's because they've had the time for that money to grow and do its work, and the power of compound.
Yeah. The other thing is, when you're 23 and 24 and you think retirement's this huge thing way off in the future, you maybe don't want to look at whatever options, or I don't care, I'll look at it next year. Really take, if you're a parent or grandparent or whatever, and you have a kid that's just starting a job, make sure that you're putting a hand around them and be like, hey, what are your options? You have some good options in your 401k? What funds, what ETFs, what indexes do you have available to you? And maybe guide them through that, because that's one of the best gifts you can give to someone starting a new job that's not, maybe didn't major in finance or economics or whatever. Then they don't really have an idea, because one thing that, coming from an education background, people are not aware usually of what they can invest in or what's best. And so the option is, I'm just going to ignore it and just do whatever the company set, or whatever the easiest thing, the path of least resistance. So, really try to help out those young employees.
Yeah, I'm going to go. I'm going to go through this. All of a sudden, you're 30, and you've got 2 kids, and you got a mortgage, and you're going, how are we going to pay for college? How are we going to pay off our house? And the last thing you want to think about is, well, I'm 35 years from being 65. I don't need any money. I mean, I can't think about that. Yeah, you need to, because if you work at that job, say the same job for 35 years, and you retire and they have a party for you, they're not going to give you, they're going to give you a watch maybe, or a necklace, and they're going to escort you out the door, and you're going to turn in your keypad because you're done, and there's not going to be a check coming in every month. My dad worked for Standard Oil for 38 years. When he retired, he got a check every month until he was gone. And your grandparents were all that way. Today when you walk out the door, it's going to be that 401k and what it's going to do for you. So, I'm not, I don't want to be the get off my lawn guy here, but participate. When you're young, you don't need to put a ton in. Participate. Get that 3% match. Get that 6% match, and forget about it, because it's coming out of your paycheck, and live on the rest, and you'll be fine.
All right, let's change gears here just for a second. So we've been talking, and we've kind of focused on that new employee, the match, making sure you're taking advantage of the match. What about somebody who's been in the workplace for a while now? Maybe their college is taken care of, and they've got a little extra income, and they want to go beyond that match. Is there an upper limit of what a person can invest in a 401k?
Yeah, $26,500 a year. I think it's going to 27 next year. Am I off on that?
I think that's true.
I can remember 40 years ago, I could remember every number, but it doesn't work that way anymore. So yeah, you can put away up to 27,000. Great. And the great thing about that, let's take a high income person. They're making, let's just say, $300,000 a year. They can put that money all into a Roth. If they try to open a Roth outside of work, they can't do it. They're not eligible.
Yep.
So that Roth feature, that's the other piece of advice that Mark and I would give to any young person. Put all your contribution into Roth, because someday that's going to be tax-free back to you. And that's a 20-some% haircut.
Yeah, and one thing to understand is your employer, and correct me if I'm wrong, can't contribute to the Roth. They have to.
No.
They have to contribute so their matches are going to go into that traditional 401k account, but you can contribute to that Roth. Yeah.
And what we recommend, and what Mark does, and what our younger employees do here, is they convert the company match over to a Roth annually. So you can do that and pay the taxes on that, and move on, and know that you're going to be tax free. And that's totally up to you, you and your tax preparer, or you and your financial advisor to look at, because that's a huge difference.
Yep.
If you can convert that money that your company put in, and let's say it cost you $400 today, boy, that's a small price to pay for down the road.
Yeah.
And money that is put into a 401k, that is different and does not count towards the contribution limit of if somebody wants to put money into an IRA outside. Is that correct?
Correct.
There are income limits, though.
Yes.
So if a husband and a wife both have a 401k plan, they do $225,000 a year, I believe. Over that amount, they cannot contribute. And I'm probably off a little bit on that number, but it's somewhere up in that category, 227. It's gauged to inflation. So we have many clients that still do Roths, or still do traditional IRAs outside of their 401k. But that's somebody that's got a very good control of their portfolio, of their savings, because most people, their income's not that high if they're still eligible to do them.
Gotcha. Now, what happens if a person has a fund at work, whether it's 401k or a 403b, 457b, TSP, and they change jobs? What happens to that 401k? Is that something where they can take that with them? Does it stay with that original company? How does that work?
Yeah, you can roll over your 401k to,
So it's portable.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
totally
portable investment. Yeah.
You can move it to an IRA. You can move it to if your new company has a plan just like it, like a 401k to 401k, you can do that with it. You can go 401k to 457, and you can leave it where it's at. So generally, sometimes you have to take it and move it, but
And that would be based on the rules of that particular plan's. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right. And most companies allow you to leave it. Some will automatically convert it to a traditional or a Roth IRA over time. It makes tremendous sense to sit down with a professional that can talk to you about what the 401k, and I think I might be jumping ahead.
Yeah,
We're going to talk some about some of the myths you're hearing today on advertising and such, but yeah, that's when you want to sit down definitely with a professional and look at your new plan, look at your options, look at the cost factors involved.
Go ahead, Mark.
No, I said, let's talk about them. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's a perfect segue, Bob. Let's talk about some of the myths. And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong here, but one of the myths that you hear is the expenses that go along with the 401k. But if I remember correctly, when these first started, 401ks were quite a bit more expensive than they are today. Is that correct?
There was a lot of hidden expenses involved in that side of the industry, and there were very few players. And so, much like homeowners insurance, costs just keep going up if you don't pay attention. 401ks could get very expensive, but generally there are options that are very, very reasonable expense ratios within a 401k. The problem is not all the time were you directed towards those. Sometimes these very large companies would guide you towards maybe some products that they had that were a little bit more expensive. The other thing was the TPA, the third party administrator. So the administration of 401ks has gotten much more reasonable, but it used to be very, very expensive. So X number of dollars per employee and all that. Well, those expenses all go into the company, but that affects how the company participates with us as an employee.
So what should a person do? Should they be looking at the different funds that are available and looking at expense ratios are required to be published? So can they look at those expense ratios? And then if a plan is super expensive, is that usually the company that can? Does it make sense to lobby your HR department to see about changing?
No, because they're not going to listen to but if it is very expensive, and hopefully human resources and the powers that be within a company will look at changing vendors, and we have seen that across the board with large employers in Northeast Kansas and out in our office out around Hayes, where they're changing over to providers that are much less expensive in terms of administrative cost. And in this day and age, it's a lot easier to admin a 401k with computers than it was in 1990 when, it was, pretty much key punch stuff, I think. I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this question about fees, Bob. You've been in the industry a long, long time. A 2% fee or a 1.5% fee, that doesn't seem like that much. Does it really matter that a 1.5% fee versus, say, a 0.25% fee? Does that really make that much difference?
Yeah, it's a loaded question because the answer. It's absolutely unreal. a 1% a year difference in management fees over a 10-year period amounts to roughly 19% haircut
Wow.
on your total portfolio. So think about that. It is a game changer. And so when people have an expensive 401k, we let them know, but we try to find, an index fund that doesn't have a lot of expense in it. And as what Warren Buffett says. Warren Buffett buys individual companies. That's why he grew Berkshire. But he said, if you don't have that ability, just go buy an S&P 500 tracking fund. And most 401ks today, does our 401k have that?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. Have that feature in it, and those will generally be, not always, but will generally be very cost efficient. But the key thing that we find, Joe, is when we sit down with somebody, and this is probably the most important thing one of the most important things we do for younger clients is we'll help them do their 401k, because they'll come in and let's say they're 28 years old. They'll have 35% of their portfolio in bonds, which we will talk to them about. We do not agree with that for that age group.
Yeah.
I'm not saying bonds are bad, but we just don't agree with that. And we would visit with that person about it and say, here's what we think you should be doing, and this is going to be much more efficient. Because in those 401ks, bond funds have expenses because they're trading, they've got expenses. And we just don't, that's just probably not where somebody needs to be until they're in their mid to late 50s. So sitting down with a professional and have them help you with their 401k is very important. And I don't want to be hogging the mic, but what's important about that is sit down with somebody outside of the company. Because if I sat down with Mark and he's doing the 401k for XYZ company, he's going to talk to me about XYZ products, because that's how he's not doing anything wrong, but that's what Mark knows. You want to go sit down with somebody outside of XYZ company that can say, oh, XYZ is kind of expensive. You might want to look at these other 2 or 3 options.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that and just say, when you look at those different options that you have, if you don't understand the difference between mutual funds, ETFs, index funds,
growth fund,
there's
value fund,
asking a professional is really important. But one thing, just an easy thing to do is, let's say there's a growth fund, mutual fund, and a growth fund ETF. Well, look at both those. Look at both the holdings. They might be holding pretty much the same things. The ETF is probably going to be half of it expensive, or even more than that. And so why just go with that option? It's going to be cheaper. So understand, if you want to do it yourself, just make sure that you are doing a little bit of research is going to be worth it. That little bit of time to take is worth it in the long run to see what they're holding. If their top 8 holdings are the same, get the cheaper option.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Don't buy 4 funds just because you think they're different. But like 4 different growth funds, because if you go in and look at them, they're going to be the same. So buy the one that has the least expense in it.
Yeah, and buying that one fund and letting that one fund compound with your dollar cost averaging is going to be more efficient than spreading it over 5 growth funds, if they're all holding the same things.
Because you're going to sit there 10 years later and go, how come this one did so much better than the other one?
Yeah.
And we're going to be able to tell you just about 100% of the time, well, it's because the fund that performed at a poorer level had higher expenses.
Yep.
Yeah, it's simple.
It seems like expenses are something that's maybe important to you.
There's 2 things. It takes time to make money, and how much am I paying for my money? And we sit with people daily that have no idea what they're paying. Our industry has been phenomenal at hiding expenses. I mean, we're good at it. And, and we get better over time. But expenses matter. But folks, when you hear an ad that says, don't be involved in your 401k, or yeah, 401ks are a big ripoff because they're so expensive. Time out. Somebody's trying to sell you something. It's not. 401ks won't be as expensive as what they want to get you into.
Yeah.
It's going to be something crazy.
Another thing that I hear is that it kind of in those same lines, they'll say, well, 401ks are risky because it's tied to the stock market. And what would you say to something like that?
You mean there's tons of different options that you can be in your 401k.
You don't have to be in the market. You can be in real estate. You can be in bonds.
Yeah, and those index funds. What a great. That's a pretty.
Somebody walks into Mark and I and goes, "I don't want to be involved in the stock market," and they're 28 years old. Mark and I got to do a lot of educating. Mark's going to become a teacher again because it's our job to help people understand why they need to accept some risk. Because the risk of not having enough money is, if you, as a young person, aren't engaged in certain things, there's a very, very good chance that you're going to not have enough money when you're retired. And that's the last thing any of us want.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to be involved in the market without feeling uncomfortable, and that's something that the industry itself has been a lot better about. There's lots of different ways to be involved without feeling pressure of risk.
And education, the availability of educating ourselves about equity risk and market risk is much greater today than it was when I started in 1977. We had a yellow pad, and we didn't understand risk. We didn't understand expenses.
So I think what I hear you saying is regardless of somebody's risk tolerance when that walks in the door to work with you, you can help them find investments that are going to be not only tailored to what they need, but also to their level of comfort.
Right. That's our first job. As a CFP, that's our first job is to make sure we are within our client's level of risk tolerance. That's the number one thing. But sometimes we have to coach and teach on that risk tolerance. If I've planted corn the same way every year since 1970, my yield's not going to be as good as if I changed with the times. And so many things today are the same in equity investing. Corn's still corn. But there are much more efficient ways, as Mark said, to control risk, to manage risk than we had back then.
I have a funny one or a myth for you, and maybe Bob, you can answer this one. But one thing I see on like YouTube and Instagram all the time is I forgot what personality he is, but he said contributing to your 401k is the worst investment you can make because you're not getting that money in your hands right now, and instead you can buy real estate or buy this life insurance, whatever. What do you say about that?
Somebody's trying to sell you something that they're going to make more on than your 401k is making on. And so anybody that would tell you that, they have no fiduciary responsibility. They have their pocketbook in mind. And the life insurance one is blowing up. Yeah. And there are people with a lot of money that are jumping on that train. And you sit there and go, your kids are going to get a lot of money when you're gone. And you're going to sit there and go, what am I doing borrowing money out of a life insurance policy all my life? I mean, but we are so adverse to paying taxes. And we all know that as consumers, as taxpayers, but Mark and I see it daily. We don't want to pay taxes. And so somebody that waives your don't be in your 401k because your money's not available. Let's buy life insurance and put it into real estate, blah, blah, blah. You're sitting there going, God, I won't have to pay any taxes. The opportunity to pay taxes is a privilege. And it probably means you're making money if you're paying taxes.
Yeah. And really, you got to think about, especially if you're young and seeing this, like your Roth options, take advantage. There's other, we've talked about backdoor Roths, other things. There are options for you to get those money, into post-tax dollars and grow tax-free. So,
and I will go, I haven't done this often, but my dad was an immigrant. And I remember my brother and I griping one year about the taxes we were paying. And he said, two things. You just thank God you live here and be happy you can pay taxes. And I've always thought about that since then. Taxes is about the third thing I think about when I look at return on something, because, if I have to, I don't want to share some of that, but if I have to, I do. And,
That's a great, healthy way to think about taxes, I think. It's kind of that thing that we don't want to do, but maybe if the government were a little bit more efficient with how they use our tax
that'd help.
dollars, that would definitely help. But
that'd help.
yeah,
Clear down to the school district, that'd help. Yeah, we'd all vote for that.
Let's look at one more myth before we start to wrap this up. If a person has an IRA that they're already contributing to, do they really need to contribute to a 401k?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You can contribute a lot more. So, I mean, and it's coming right out of your payroll. Just like we talked about before. Is it great to have different pillars of retirement? 100%. If you have the ability to keep funding your IRA, do it. But
reminds me of this has happened quite a few times in my career, but where somebody will be going to K-State and they got a job and they're savers. I think at K-State, because that was where the last young person was from. And they'll go, hey, I want to start putting some money in an IRA. I'm 19. And so we'll open up an IRA for them. And all of a sudden they're 23 and they got a job up in Des Moines with a seed company or something. And they'll call up and say, hey, Bob, I got an IRA. I got 401k. And I'll go, okay, we're going to stop your IRA and you max that 401k. Well, why don't I want to keep doing, or you put as much as you can into your 401k. Well, why don't I want to keep doing my $50 a month? And I'll say, because they're going to match what you're putting in up there, and it's payroll deduct. And with this $50 a month that you're putting in here, now they stay with us. And those clients have a nice, because they were working and didn't need it in college, a nice little nest egg they're building, but they're also, we encourage them to jump into those 401ks. Absolutely. Even if they're not with us,
So I think the theme here is there are a lot of myths out there, and overall 401ks, 403bs, 457b, whatever you have at your employment, those are great funds to get in.
Yep.
Great funds to get in. Yep. Probably because of that match, probably the first place you need to look when it comes to investing. Is that what's fair to say?
Yep. Mm-hmm. And there's a last caveat on that, and these guys have probably already turned us all off, is the ag producer, the small businessman, like ourselves in here. 401ks used to be too expensive in terms of admin cost. Those have come way down. We have a 401k here, or we have ag producers that have 401ks that have dad and mom and one employee. You can set up a 401k very efficiently, and you can do profit sharing in it if you want. So not only can you max out the contribution as an ag producer, but also if you have a nice year, you can share some of that profit with yourself and your employee. Well, you're probably going to put more away for yourself than you are for your employee, because who makes the income in a small business is the owner. So we have found that works very, very well for ag and small business owners, where it used to be, we're going to do a simple IRA for you because they're inexpensive. The 401ks have become just as efficient for people.
Very good. As we wrap this up, Mark, what are some tips that people can use to kind of maximize how they're taking advantage of their 401k plan at work?
Yeah. First one would be, make sure, we've talked about this, but you're contributing up to the, at least up to the match, trying to take advantage of that match.
100% return on your dollar.
Yep. 100% return on your dollar. There's not many things that can do that for you.
Day one.
Yeah. That's pretty incredible. The next one, I guess, would be try to increase your contributions annually if you can. There's like that portion of your life where things, maybe you're having kids, it's kind of hard, but make sure at least every year you're evaluating that as your salary increases or whatever it is. Make sure you're evaluating that every year. And at some point, when maybe your kids are gone or whatever, you can increase that by quite a bit. But try at least to increase annually if you can. Yeah.
It takes me back to school teachers. When I started working with school teachers on 403Bs, teachers have different types of retirement plans, or public workers do. When I first started working, we would start $30 a month. And I would go back every year and say, we're just going to go up $10 a month, unless you want to go up more than that. But every year I'm going to come and bother you, and we're going to go up $10 a month. And did that for years. And then when the kids got raised or out of college, all of a sudden they might say, let's go up $50 a month this year or whatever. I have 3 millionaires, retired school teachers, educators, that put away, started out at $30 a month.
Educators are the third largest profession of like millionaires per capita or something like that.
Yeah.
That shows you I think that's from what book is that? The Millionaire Next Door.
Yeah.
That's a surprising thing for most people, but stuff like that.
And why is that, Mark? We've talked about this. Why is that?
Because they're savers.
More importantly, teachers listen.
Yeah, they're coachable.
They are coachable.
Mm-hmm.
If you say to a young school teacher, Susie, you need to put away $30 a month, and I'll come back every year and we'll increase it by $10 a month. They'll go, I probably ought to do something. Whereas, as opposed to, I'll do something someday. You're just trying to sell me something, And no, we're not. We're trying to help you put a saddle on your horse and get riding.
Yeah,
very good.
Yeah,
good point, Mark.
Yeah. But what were we saying? Tips for maximizing?
Yeah. So what about diversification?
Yeah. Make sure that each year you're looking at yours, making sure that you're being cost effective. Make sure you are taking advantage of the best types of options that they give that are, don't have expense ratios. Make sure you're looking each year and seeing if you have options that have changed and see if they're better.
And don't worsification your portfolio.
Yeah, don't do something just because you think you need to. If something's working, I'd keep rolling with it, and like if you want to just be an index investor, be a bogglehead, whatever the name for that, but and just make sure you're just staying on top of that, staying on top of what your company's offering. There's one example I'll just say really quick is, we looked at someone and they had some really good funds that they had, and then we went into. They're like, hey, we want to change some stuff up and just rebalance a little bit. And I'm like, yeah, let's look at it. But they looked, and all those funds that employer had been in had changed that year. And that was kind of a shock. And so we had to go through everything again. So make sure you are looking at that each year. Yeah.
Good. Great talk about 401ks and more in general, just funds and ways to invest through your employer. Just big picture, take advantage of those, take advantage of that match. Once again, if Bob or Mark or the team at Bob Schwartz Financial can help you with that, they're happy to look at what you have available at work, help you get into the funds that make sense to your individual needs. So BobSchwartzFinancial.com, once again, offices in Silver Lake, Kansas, Victoria, Kansas. And gentlemen, thank you very much for a great conversation today. And once again, give us a subscribe and a thumbs up on YouTube and a rating on the podcast. And we will talk to you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.